John, a few months ago, you stepped down as pastor for Preaching and Vision at Bethlehem, or stepped into a role as associate pastor for Preaching and Vision, but then on Easter Sunday, no longer a pastor at Bethlehem.
Right.
We're talking in the aftermath of that. Of course, you know the Twitter account Fake John Piper.
I've heard of it.
Right? You've heard of it?
I haven't
Okay.
seen it for years.
Okay. Fake John Piper, after Easter Sunday, said this about your retirement. Okay. Retirement to-do list week 1. Catch up on Little House on the Prairie reruns. Arc Leviticus. See if Savers is hiring. Write 3 books.
We do go to Savers.
Week 1. You do go to Savers.
Yeah, my wife loves Savers.
What's left for week 2 in retirement for real John Piper?
Okay. Well, to finish out my responsibilities here at the Gospel Coalition, to visit my son, to go home and enjoy a farewell service.
Okay. When is that?
That's the 14th of April,
all right,
so
okay.
Sunday, a week from today as we're
Okay.
recording.
Okay.
And then get the house packed up and get it ready for renters who are coming home from the mission field. We'll take it for a year, and then we will do the same thing with my wife's cousin's house in Tennessee and go there for 14 months or so and try to find ourselves.
What are you looking for?
The new John Piper. My son asked me, "What are you going to do, Daddy?" And I said, "Find myself." And that's only partially a joke, meaning, I feel like I'm 22 again. I just graduated from college, and I could do anything I want as long as I make a living. Only now I don't have to make a living. I mean, that's real amazing freedom, because I've been putting so much money in Social Security and in a retirement account, I wouldn't have to make any money. So when you've got that much freedom, you're really faced with significant don't waste your life choices. So I do pray. I mean, I mean for that year to be earnest seeking the Lord. If you give me 10 years. My dad died when he was 87. I'm 67.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he wasn't clear-headed for the last 5 years. So maybe if I followed his path 15 years, what should I do with 15 years? That's a huge stewardship.
So for a long time, you were building toward this point. Was there a lot of thought given to what those next 15 years, if the Lord gives them, would look like? Or was it in the moment?
No, there hasn't been a lot of thought, except I love to do some things that had to take back seat during pastoring.
Yeah.
Writing, even though I've written a lot, has taken a back seat. I was a pastor who writes, or let's say a preacher who writes, and now I think I'll be a writer who preaches. So that's my sense. The Lord could say, no, you're going to be a missionary who does neither, or something like that. But my goal, as I presently discern my calling, is that what has been marginal, like 4 weeks a year and sermons, writing, will become dominant, and preaching will be occasional. That's my sense.
So the everyday for this next year at least,
Yeah.
what does that look like?
I'll get up and I'll go to my desk when I'm not traveling. I mean, we've got several traveling things planned, but I hope to get up and go to my desk and sit down at my computer and read my Bible for an hour and a half, pray, ask God's blessing, and plow into at least 3 or 4 book projects. I'd like to get at least 3 done and part of another. They're not big projects, so they couldn't do them in a year. But
So it'll take longer than a week. In other words, it'll take
one
a
of
little
them will
while.
take about a week.
Okay.
Because it's that little. It's that little.
Okay.
But another one will take a month and that sort of thing. So yeah, I think what those days will look like is me going to my desk and putting in 8 to 10 hours on a book project.
Okay. Doing some travel, some preaching, some
Yeah.
teaching?
Yeah,
Okay.
we've got, I don't know, a dozen or
Okay.
14 of this kind of event planned.
Yeah. So no time to volunteer or work at Savers, but you'll stay plenty busy.
Well, no volunteer time at Savers. We take stuff to Savers, and then Noelle shops for our clothing. I don't. She buys what I need,
Okay, all right.
and I'm going to need a lot less. Yeah, I probably won't wear my preaching suit for a long time.
Okay, all right. Well, no longer a pastor, what won't you miss about being a pastor?
I won't miss meetings where I can't figure things out. I don't mind meetings that are productive. You come away with a plan, really good plan. Yes, we figured out small groups, or yeah, we figured out evangelism, we figured out counseling. That almost never happened to me in the last 15 years. I felt like I had pushed my creative organizational abilities to the limit and had lived on that limit for some time, which is why I came to the conclusion, mainly, why I think I love to preach. I could preach till I'm dead. At Bethlehem, there's no place I'd rather preach than my local church. But pastoring is so much more than preaching. You're going to lead a people, love a people, shepherd and disciple, and mobilize a people. You got to think about structures. And the bigger the church gets, the more complicated that gets. And I managed it for 25 years or so, and then I hit the wall over and over again. And I think my staff is probably taking a deep sigh of relief if they're honest and saying, we're glad there's somebody in here now who maybe shepherd us through some of these really tough decisions, because I won't miss that. I won't miss meetings where you go home and you say to Noel, I'm no good at this. I don't want to say that. I don't like
Did
saying
you think about stepping aside
that.
earlier?
All the time. I mean, I've been thinking about it for 30 years. Every time there's one of these seasons where you bump up against an insoluble problem, you just say, am I cut out for this? I'm a preacher. I'm a thinker. I'm a writer. What am I doing trying to lead this organization? And God has been just incredibly good to me. And surrounded me with a lot of smart people who get breakthroughs where I can't. And that carried the day. I mean, a leader can ride on the coattails of his associates for a while. And so, yeah, I thought about quitting a lot. And here's the beautiful thing that I look back with such thankfulness for. The Lord never let those ready to move feelings come when there was an opportunity to move. The opportunities to move came when I didn't want to move. And so he timed it perfectly so that there was never any opportunity to move if I thought, I'm going to quit tomorrow. And nobody called and said, we'd like you to come teach at our seminary. Nobody ever called at that moment. And so when they showed some interest, I said, why would I want to leave this? It's just going so great. So God just is totally in charge, I think, of keeping me there as long as he had and making it as fruitful as it was.
Let's look at this from a different perspective then. Most people watching this video, most people who know you from a distance, they know you as a writer and as a preacher at conferences and places like that. Where is it necessary, or why is it necessary to know you as a pastor throughout all that process, and even as you continue? How does being a pastor, that identity continue in this new stage, even without an official role?
Oh, that last thing you said isn't what I thought you
Oh,
meant.
well,
by
keep
the
going
first
where
thing.
you thought.
When you said, why should they know you as a pastor, I thought you meant during those 33 years. But maybe they're the same answer, so I'll answer what I thought you meant.
Let me put it this way then. A lot of people, they might look up to you and they see the conference speaking, they see the book writing, and that's when they say, I look up to John Piper, I want to be like John Piper. That's what they see. Okay. They don't see those meetings.
Right.
So what are they missing?
What people miss is that the sorrows, and I'll start with sorrows rather than joys, the sorrows of the pastorate make the preacher. Okay. If there's a weight, if there's a seriousness, if there's a tear, if there's an agonizing in the preaching, it comes from having buried babies, having held the hand of old people who ought to die way long time ago, and they can't die, and their tongue is turning black like a cinder, and they're asking me, why won't he take me? And marriages that shatter, and disabled babies that are born and grow up. We had this sweet prayer meeting. My last sermon at the North Campus, Michael came. And they're going to watch this, so I'm going to say this with open-hearted love. Michael came. How old is Michael now? I should know. A young teen in a wheelchair, and he was going, oh, oh. And I was hearing Michael in the background saying, he is risen. He is risen. So you live with enough sorrows and pains. That's what people need to know is feeding, preaching. Feeding, preaching. We're not toying with texts and having a good time intellectually. We are struggling to find truth that's going to help a person die, help a person lose somebody in dying, help a person suffer with cancer, help a person deal with the loss of a job. So being a pastor has been gold for me. It's just being in and with people. So one of the questions then for the future is, does that all have to be past tense? Yeah. And I hope not. I'm going to go home after 14 months, and I'm going to be, Lord willing, in my church. Not my because I'm the pastor, but my because I'm a member. I'm accountable to the elders. They can excommunicate me if I do something stupid. That's my church. And while I'm there, I hope that I can be in a small group, like everybody should be, and nurture people that I have access to. And I'll teach some in our seminary, and these guys are all around me. These 60 seminary students are there, and I hope that I can be in their lives. So the pastoral, non-office role, I don't think is going to go away.
Did you leave Bethlehem with any regrets?
Yes. Endless regrets. I regret everything I've ever done. Meaning, it could have always been done better. I just quoted Spurgeon upstairs in the hotel room, who said, a man is not a good man if he doesn't think he can be better. That's true. And that's true now, and that's true in the past. So in order to have any sense of authenticity, I feel like I have to look back and say, every meeting I ever led, I could have led better. My staff would sure say so. So I could have been a better dad. Good night. I could have been a better husband. I could have preached better. I could have done more personal evangelism. And if you would ask me, well, do you really regret that, or are you just saying you could have done better? And my answer is, it depends on how low I am. Yes, when I stand before Jesus and give an account of these 33 years, which Hebrews 13 says I'm supposed to do, give an account for the souls that I shepherded, I'm not going to plead any B pluses on my papers. I'm going to say, I sure hope there's some really solid C's, good money C minuses, and a bunch of D's that he's going to be merciful toward and throw in the basket and cover it with his blood. I don't look back with any sense of triumphal success on anything. I look at what I did, and every time, Don Carson said this to me, it made me feel good. He said, every time I preach and come out of the pulpit, I feel like I could have done so much better. So yeah, there are regrets, and if I got real specific, I could point to some terrible blunders that probably wouldn't be appropriate for public.
Well, but how do you, I think we want to tell ourselves, I don't have any regrets. It's sort of just a common thing that we say. But the reality that we experience and feel is so different, because we know at one level that there's so many things we could have done differently, right. And then we do think about specific things. Right.
The statement, no regrets, if I were to use that, would mean I'm glad I did it. I wouldn't do it. I would not do it over. Did I say that right to me?
You'd make the same decision to leave Bethel, to go to Bethlehem, yes. To stay at Bethlehem.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I would. I don't regret having become a pastor. I don't regret having stayed a pastor. I don't regret having pastored this people. I don't regret any of the staff that we sin issues or falling short of ideal issues. Not that I was where I was or I did the sorts of things that I did. I'm glad. And, if people said, do you regret spending so much time writing books? Like, why not visit people more and why not do more personal evangelism and so on? I'd say I might have made the wrong call here and there, but I would probably do that over again.
And that comes from knowing your particular gifting and your particular calling?
Gifting, fruit, perceived, and just gut not able not to do it. We like to think we're really rational folks. And we line up our gifts, and we line up our opportunities, and we line up our people's affirmations, and we put that in a bowl, and it is crystal clear now as the smoke rises what we should do. It's never like that. It's never like that. Not at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Do you go to the hospital? Do you visit a sick? Do you go out on the street and do some evangelism, or do you sit down and write a star article? Tell me how you're going to decide that. Tell me. I never figured that out. So I'd pray. I'd say, God, please. And then I would make a choice. And given the way I'm wired, usually feel C-ish about the choice. But no sense that, well, if I'd really been really rational, this would have been the choice. I said, maybe. Which is why, lest we not say it, I love the gospel. I love the fact, even though I preached this morning about judgment according to works, and I believe that, bottom line at the judgment day is the blood, right? Bottom line, and whether I have any future with God at all as an imperfect pastor, is he loved me and gave himself for me.
We may have regrets, but we have a perfect Savior.
Absolutely. And the regrets. Marshall and I, my assistant, were talking about this yesterday. Will there be regrets in heaven? You just like, there's no sadness in heaven. And I said, here's my tentative answer. Go on camera. I think that the cross, which will be sung about forever, would be meaningless if I couldn't remember why he died, namely me and my rottenness. And in remembering it, feel some sense of appropriate remorse, which then, here's the key, serves my greater joy in the age to come. So that if a tear, it says he's going to wipe away all tears, I don't think he's going to wipe away tears of happiness. And I don't think he's going to wipe away tears which, when they fall, catch the rainbow of God's grace and make it shine the more brightly, because I love the cross more because I remembered some sin that he forgave. So I think even in heaven there will be a species of regret.
Let's talk more about what this retirement is going to look like. Jonathan Edwards died before he was able to finish his history of a work of redemption. Now, I know that you would say that it'd be better by far to go with Jesus right now. Are there any projects, though, that you would be disappointed if you didn't have a chance to finish before Jesus called you home?
You asked me that in the hall a few minutes ago.
I gave you a heads up.
And
I didn't give you a heads up about fake John Piper.
I don't think I would say anything different now than I did then. And my answer is I really don't feel that there is. I have definite goals. Like, I preached 252 sermons on Romans. I would like Romans to be a 4-volume Martin Lloyd-Jones type set of books. If I died this afternoon, Marshall or David Mathis or somebody would do that. And they do it probably as well as I would. I don't feel like, I've got to get this done, I got to get this done. Because when I preached them, they're all written, they're all on the web. I mean, everybody can read them now anyway. So as I look at the things I want to do, they're not. And what that says to me is God has enabled me to put the radicals of my message in books and in sermons. And they're there. I don't expect to metamorphose into anything different than what's there. I don't expect to come any radical new conclusions, and I doubt that I'll say it much better than I've been able to say it. So if he took me out, I would have some relational issues I would want settled, okay. Which I can't talk about. But that's where my heart would go.
But that helps you to understand retirement, of how you'll be spending your time
Yeah.
and what you're thinking about in whatever time God gives.
Yeah.
You're thinking personally about as far as things that you want to.
That, and I'm just not going to be operating with these books under a sense of nervousness, like, is this a heart attack? Well, God, I'm only on page 83. I don't think I'll even be thinking that way at all. I'll just work on what I can work on and spread as much good news as I can and strengthen as many pastors and missionaries as I can. And when he's ready, he'll take me out.
Critics of the Reformed resurgence often credit you almost singularly for this phenomenon. Because one thing they say is that if John Piper goes, then the movement goes with him.
That's crazy. That's insane.
Why?
They didn't hear David Platt preach last night. And goodness gracious, they're not aware of you. They're not aware of the Gospel Coalition. They're not aware of T4G. They're not aware of Passion. This thing that God has done has a life of its own. In fact, I would say almost the opposite. I would say the sooner I get out of the way, maybe the better. Because there are men your age who are rising, smarter than I am, read more than I am, preach better than I do, and they're there waiting for responsibility and taking it as it comes. And there's none of them kind of leaning on John Piper like, oh, dear me. I mean, that's a 15-year-old talk. That's the way I was when I was 15. You know, I thought I had these awful thoughts that if Billy Graham died, Christianity would come to an end. That is the most insane, immature 15-year-old talk that you could imagine. And that's the way it is now. So in no way does this movement today key off of me. I am happily watching the emergence of young leaders, young ministries, amazing churches, church planting movements, mission passion that's just totally disconnected from me.
We see this trend as encouraging when we see all these leaders. I think at the same time, a lot of people in our churches, they look at what's happening in the church and the culture today, and they're very discouraged by what they see. How do you think through that? Are you discouraged by what you see in the church and culture, or encouraged? And compared to how when you started at Bethlehem?
Yeah. One of my points in the message I gave here was that a remedy for not being disillusioned by what you see is to have realistic expectations for what will be. I don't expect much from the culture. I totally reject the statement, the culture is the report card of the church. And what I mean is, my eschatology is not postmillennial. It is very optimistically premillennial, but what it means is that when you read 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, especially 2nd Thessalonians 2, there is a man of lawlessness, an antichrist, there is a great apostasy, there is a great persecution, and I have no idea how close we are to that. I don't have any signs of the times that to me say, it's going to happen in your generation. We could be here for another 5,000 years, according to my eschatology. And all kinds of revolutions of revival could happen in those 5,000 years. But, on the other hand, we could be close. Which means, if you have that view, then when things are dark, you don't say, oh, we've blown it as a church. We have blown it. I mean, read the book of Revelation. Did John ever give the indication that the church being martyred and slaughtered had blown it? These were the most godly people in the world, and they were being killed right and left. It takes a white-hot faith to get the mission done in the midst of hostility and to die as martyrs. So, yes, I'm discouraged about American culture. And no, I'm not discouraged about the movement of God in the world and including in America. We have no idea what the sovereignty of God might be pulling off. He might be taking us down a judgment path in our sexual morality, for example, in order to do something utterly stunning for his greater grace and greater glory. I mean, wouldn't it be just like God to say, get all the people who don't believe in the sovereignty of God despairing because the culture has gone to hell in a handbasket, and suddenly the Holy Spirit falls, stunning revival, churches awaken, millions of people pouring into the church, regretting they ever voted on that law. Why not? Because he's God. He can do whatever he wants to do. So I think the attitude we ought to have is that culture is bleak. Don't beat yourself up about it. Become more passionate, more white hot. Torch the glacier of lukewarmness or the glacier of ice cold indifference, and make a big bright spot between you and the glory of God, and let your city and your church not be among the number who are apostatizing.
Well, in our culture, in our church today, people, I think, feel like we're fairly, as Christians, divided and ineffective. Now we've probably felt that almost in every different age. But it sounds like with an understanding of the sovereignty of God and the way God works all things for his glory, that speaks into that question of, is the church today divided and ineffective, and how might we change that?
Well, my first thing to say in regard to that is the church has never been dependent on unity for effectiveness. That's people batter that. I mean, I've been hearing people say that all my ministry life. Got to get all the pastors to city in one room, praying together and agreeing about everything before revival will come. What? Read Colossians. Read Ephesians. Read 1 Corinthians. It was a mess and spreading like wildfire. There's no correlation necessarily. I mean, I love unity. I want to be a peacemaker, but I'm not about to say there are these preconditions of togetherness before God is going to send revival. That would be revival. I mean, if all the pastors in one city got together, that wouldn't be precursor for revival. That would be revival. So yes, let's pursue every kind of proper togetherness that we can that honors the truth and honors the Scripture. But let's not assume that the future effectiveness of the church is going to wait around until the church gets its act together. I mean, today, we talk about ineffectiveness. I'm not sure what the people's expectations are when they say ineffective. Anybody that listens to a testimony of a convert would say, ineffective with that person? Yeah. How many people do you have to be effective with for it to be effective? And then there's, the church is 10,000 times bigger than America. Mm-hmm. I mean, I mentioned this morning, I don't know if I mentioned it or not, I meant to mention it, that after the United States, who are the three biggest sending countries in the world? I mean, send the most missionaries.
Right.
India, right. Number 2, China, number 3, South Korea, number 4, Great Britain, and then Nigeria, I believe, in that order. So if the church vanished in America, it wouldn't affect God's purpose. He's just moving right on. He'll get it done with Argentina or Brazil or Nigeria or South Korea or China or India. He's going to get his job done. So I don't fret about what's happening here. I just want to, and I would encourage pastors to just, you've got a slice of life. It's very small, very small. People think I'm a big shot. I'm a big shot in a tiny little pond. Like my father-in-law used to say, I'm a big fish in a very little pond. Meaning he was at a 200-person church and everybody thought he was the main man. So your main man, 99.999% of the world never heard of John Piper. And we should just realistically be about our job, pouring our lives into what's in front of us, and let God handle the big spreading issues.
What is the fruit of the Spirit you would pray God would give Christians for this day? Thankfully, he gives us all of them. But is there any in particular that you see you petition God for in this day?
Love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, meekness, faithfulness, self-control. Well, we sure need self-control. Sexually, we need self-control. I was with some pastors down in Fort Lauderdale, and one of them used the phrase, pulsating sensuality. Boy, did that hit home to me. That's a good phrase for South Florida. Pulsating sensuality. The media pulsate with sensuality. And that word in the Greek for self-control is mainly referring to sexual self-control. And so that would be. But I hate to say that's the main one. It is not.
We
the
need
main
all
one.
of them.
Exactly.
God gives
I mean,
all
love
of
is
them.
love is mentioned first because it's the sum. It's the sum of the others. If you're a truly biblically loving person, these other 8 are going to take their place. So
Good
I'd
point.
have to choose love. A robust, God-centered, Bible-saturated, Christ-exalting, mission-advancing, justice-pursuing love. That's what we need.
Great. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Colin.